Hi, I'm Alexander Maxim from PHP. Today we will continue our series about PHP. We will check the get and post methods, the server, request method, PHP self, and query string variables. In this tutorial, we will learn how the client transfer the informations to the server and how the server receive these informations using the channel get and post. Firstly, what's the server? A program is called a server program that provides a service in the network. The server accepts requests, processes them, and sends them back to the client. Then, what's the client? The client is a program that uses the services offered by a server. The client sends a request to the server and receives the response. There are several cases that we can use the client-server architecture in PHP. A very good example, a login page. A client wants to connect. He will enter the username and password, and the system will check the existence of this client. How it works? We have, for example, a form with the input username and password, with the name, username, and password, and the values by default Alexander and Maxim. The client will fill these fields, and after going click on connect. By the method post or get, the informations will be transmitted to the server as a request. The server will receive an array, either get or post, with the values that the client has filled. The server can, for example, connect with database or make conditions, etc. And now, how do they work? Let's start with the get method. What's the get method? The get method circulates the information of the form in clear in the address bar by following the format www your site, so the interrogation point, then the name of the parameter and the value. Between the parameters, the URL gives the sign and. Contrary to what can be read frequently on the web, the maximum limit of a URL is not 255 characters. There is in fact no standard limit. This is because the maximum size of a URL can be configured on both the server and the client side. A web server administrator can either increase or decrease the maximum length of URLs. As for browsers, they also set default maximum size. It's therefore recommended not to abuse the length of a URL when you don't control the entire production environment, web server and clients. Let's now use an example to understand the get method. So the method by default here is get. When we click on connect, the server will open the page rc1l.php. What we have in this file? We have nothing. So firstly, when the user enters the username and the password, so it will fill the input, and then he will click on connect. The form contains the get as a method and the input with the name, username, and the name password. The form will send the informations to the server, and the server will receive these informations using the name of the input. So the server will receive the value of the input that the user entered. The get method will send the informations explicitly, and it will be sent by the address bar, by the URL. So we have the parameter username, and the value that the user entered is Alexander, and the password is the name of the input, and the value is Maxim. Let's, for example, click on connect. When we click on connect, we have Alexander and Maxim. When we change it, for example, to Alexander and like that, for example, this is the value of the input with the name, username, and with the input with the name, password. Then the server will receive the values that the user entered by the $_get array. It's an associative array. The keys are the names of inputs, and the values are the values of these keys. This is for the get method. So I'm in the server. My machine is the user and the server at the same time. I will use printr to print the get array. Let's reload and see the results. And when we click connect, we will get the username Alexander and the password is Maxim. So the key is the name of the input and the value is the value by default. So for example, when we change it to Utopian, when we click connect, the get array will be changed to Utopian and Maxim. I want now, for example, to use echo to print just the username. So now I will print the value of the key username in the get array. Let's reload and see the result, and we have Utopian. When we change it, for example, to Steemit, the value here will be changed, username to Steemit, and we get the username and we print it in this page. So the server will get the username and the password that the user entered, and will, for example, connect with the database and check if our username or our user exists in our database. So we have the username Alexander and the password Maxim. So if our user exists, it will return, for example, a message to the user in the web page. I have declared two variables, username and password. This variable will have the value of the username key, and the password will have the value that the user entered in the input password. So I will check if the username is not equals to null and the password not equals to the empty value. I will print welcome username, your password is password. Let's reload and see the result. And when we enter, for example, Utopian and the password is Utopian, and we have welcome Utopian, your password is Utopian. Let's, for example, pass the empty value, we will get nothing. I will use the else if the username equals to null or the password equals to null. I will include the RC1 PHP, so I will include the form again, and I will use echo to print please enter your username and password. So when we pass the empty value in the form, we will get please enter your username and password, and we will get the form again. So we have included the page rc1.php. Imagine if the user, for example, we pass Alexander and Maxim, and if the user deleted this query string. So this format called query string, the parameter value and parameter value called query string. When the user, for example, deletes this and enter, so we will have an error. Why? Because we haven't the username and the password. The get array can't find the username and the password passed on the URL. So the get is empty and the username will be empty, and we will get an error. How to solve this error? To solve this error, we need to use the isSet method. What's the isSet method? When we pass, for example, this key to the isSet method, it will return a Boolean value, true or false. True if there is a value for this key, and false otherwise. So we will use if condition if the isSet is true. So if isSet is true for the username, if we have a value in the username and we have value in the password, we will get these values. Let's reload and see the result. When we pass Alexander and Maxim, when we delete the query string, we will get welcome not found, your password is not found. The get method is not secure. Why? Because the user can't change the username and the password, or can't change all the data passed on the URL here as a query string. So it can, for example, change it to Jack, and here Jack, and like it will see the informations or the page of Jack, and it can enter as Jack here in the database. This is not secure. The post method is secure. Why? Because we haven't a query string in the post method. The user just enter the username and the password in the form, and it will be sent to the server implicitly without a query string. So what's the post method? This method for its part transmits the information of the form in a hidden but an encrypted manner. Failure to display the data does not mean that it's encrypted. Remember, moreover, that this information uses the HTTP and not HTTPS protocol, HTTP secure, that encrypts the data. The post method is preferred when there is a large amount of data to transmit or when sensitive data needs to be sent as, for example, password. In some cases, only the post method is required for example, a file upload. If we have a sensitive data like a password and we want to send it implicitly, what we will do, we will use the post method as place of the get method. Is the same thing. So when the user enters the username and the password, and when he clicks on connect, these inputs are in the form, the method is post, the URL will be without the query string, and the data will be sent to the server. The server can, for example, connect with the database, check if the user exists in our database. You have 3 users, for example, Alexander, Maxim exists in our database, so it will, for example, allow the user to enter to the site, and to get the values is by the $_post. It's also an associative array. This keys are the names of the inputs and the values are the values of these keys in the post method. So the same thing, just we will change the get by the post. Let's reload and see. And when we pass Alexander and Maxim, we have no query string, and we have welcome Alexander, your password is Maxim. So the server has executed this. So we have the post array and the values here. After that, we have the $server. The $server, we have many variables. We will take, for example, PHP self variable. What's the PHP self variable? By using the PHP self, you can find the file name of the currently executing script with the backslash before the name. We can use it in the action attribute. Now the executing file is rc1l.php, and here is rc1.php. Let's, for example, try it. I'm in the rc1.php. I need to use the PHP self in the action attribute. The value is the server PHP self. So when we use echo to print the server, let's reload and see the results, and we have rc1.php, which is the file name of the execution page. When we use it in the action attribute as a value, we will stay in the same page. So when we click here, we will stay in the same page. We can, for example, here use echo for the username. Let's reload and see, and we have Alexander, for example. So the PHP self will return the file name of the currently executing script, which is, for example, in our case, /rc1.php. We can use it in the action attribute as a value. After that, we have the request method. What's the request method? The request method variable gets the request or the query passed on the URL. It can be post, get, etc. Let's use an example to understand the request method. So we have server request method. Let's reload and see the results. And we have post. Let's change it to get. And when we click on connect, it will be get. Why we use this variable? For example, to check if the method is get or post. If the method is get, I will do something. If post, I will do other thing. This is the request method. Then we have the query string. What's the query string? The query string is the username Alexander and password is Maxim. So the former parameter value and parameter value. For the request method, we have post and get. For example, it returns the request or the query passed on the URL, and the query string will return this format, which is in the URL also. Let's print the query. Let's reload and see the results. And we have username Alexander and password is Maxim. Let's change it to, for example, like it, and which will be this username. We can pass it to the parse str method, and it will return the username and the password values.